Warm welcome to everyone. Uh, let's get started with this discussion. We have a very esteemed panel today. With me is Mr. Naveen from ATI Motors. We have Ranjit from Chiratae Investors, and we have Derek from Accenture and also a startup of Futura. A very exciting panel, all veterans in Industry 5.0. Let's start the conversation. I would first request all the panelists to give us their sense of what Industry 5.0 means to them and certain opening remarks, and we will take the conversation forward from there. Derek, let's start with you.
Good morning, all of you. Pleasure to be here. I will start with where the money is, right? For this, right? The tech is there. So, where are we seeing a willingness to pay for industrial AI itself? So, from our perspective, we are seeing a lot of willingness to pay for the energy sector, upstream drilling operations, onshore and offshore. We've seen this traction for industrial AI and robotics in Middle East, Houston specifically. So energy operations is one place where we're seeing a lot of traction. The second area, which is again a big cash cow, is in the utility sector, grid operations specifically. There are a lot of applications for both sensor AI and vision AI and robotic applications out there. We're seeing budgets being allocated for robotic and industrial operations. And third area where you're seeing this is mining operations, specifically safety in underground mining operations. So these are three areas where I think organizations have allocated money. It's not POC, not just a POC and say, show me the art of the possible. They really want to scale this. So it's no longer a vitamin, it's a painkiller. So that's one area where we're seeing traction. Now from a demand, that's the demand side of the marketplace, right? From the supply side of things, I think from a specialist skill perspective, I think there is an opposite. If you look at the healthcare industry, right, you don't have generic MBBS. I mean, you have a generic MBBS folks, but they started specializing cardiologists, oncologists, pulmonologists. So I think a similar construct needs to be there in the industrial AI space. Today we have a generic industrial AI capability construct. But I think there is a need in the next coming years to specialize in spectral AI, edge AI, so to speak, and drone-related analytics. So super specialization in industrial AI, both from a product perspective, the people capability is something which we are anticipating.
Yeah. Ranjit, your perspective?
Yeah, so hello everyone. My name is Ranjit Menon. I'm a partner at a fund called Chiratae. We are India's largest homegrown venture capital fund. We manage about $1.3 billion. We've been investing in India for the last 18 years or so. And what is interesting is that we've committed close to $150 odd million into deep tech in general. Okay, this is across the last 18 years. It's very opportunistically done, if you really ask me, because in 2006, 2007, when we started investing, there's very little in terms of, industrial or AI and any of those kind of things. And my background itself, I came from manufacturing. So from the fund's perspective, I started looking at robotics very, very early. And the journey has been very, very interesting. From Fund 1 to Fund 5, where we are today looking at very specifically allocating maybe 12 to 15% of our capital into deep tech investments. And these are across few areas, some of them in the advanced manufacturing space. We are looking at which will have industrial AI specifically around that. We have actually invested in one company called Frings that is trying to do something in the automation space on the industrial side. We've invested in a company called -0, which is around automation. You'll talk about it a lot more. But that's an area that we think is very, very interesting. We've also invested in robotics. Right now, it's very interesting. While we have not invested anything on the industrial side, our investment is in a company called Miko, which is a consumer robot. Right? It sells specifically in the US, given the price points and so on and so forth. So Few things that is, I think, specifically different for us in this time frame is the fact that our focus around deep tech and industrial has gone up significantly. 12 to 15% of our capital would go into some of these areas, and also these are, we believe, emerging areas in India, which if you take a 15-20 year view, will be extremely critical from a sovereign perspective as well. So that's really where we are. We'll be happy to share more.
Thanks, Ajit. Naveen, I would like to hear your experiences in autonomous technologies at ATI and your perspective on it.
Thanks, Abhijit. Good afternoon, everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here. ATI, as a company, we have been working on autonomous mobile robots. We are a pre-COVID startup. When we started out, a lot of our robots were intended for automotive companies and automotive component suppliers because they were the sector that really took to Industry 4.0 first. Digitalization of their backend and more automation is something that was part of their fiscal budgets. But that has changed drastically post-COVID. A lot of these other verticals like FMCG, pharmaceuticals, healthcare, electronics industries, there's been there's a push for semiconductors now. So all these verticals have taken to automation way too hard. They realized there could be black swan events like COVID, and all of them are now customers. All of them have installed robots and adopted this kind of a technology. So that's something that we see that Industry 5.0 is naturally happening in the physical AI space. Of course, in the industrial AI space, as Derek mentioned, and their company has been doing some phenomenal work. Ranjit's firm has backed like a lot of good firms in that space. So we see this is going to be a confluence of multiple things. There is going to be robotics, where humans and robots can collaborate seamlessly, and there's going to be a software industrial AI layer on top of it, which is going to make these things much more fluid. So that's the way we see how Industry 5.0 is going to be adopted across verticals. Thank you.
Thanks, Naveen. That's an interesting point. So I would stick to that, Naveen, and say, over the years we have seen the edge computing become cheaper. We have seen sensor fusions happening. We have seen such SLAM algorithms improving. So how do you see the future of robotic autonomy as we go along, especially in the context of Industry 5.0 and in the context of, I would say, Indian industries or MSMEs, where it's rather unstructured. The shop floor is rather unstructured. So that should be an interesting problem to solve.
No, that's a great question. As compute power is falling down, as you correctly mentioned, right? And also technological breakthroughs that have been happening the last 4-5 years. 6-7 years back, the job was very different. The robots are supposed to do their functions, but don't hit anything. Be safe. That's about it. But now it's more nuanced, more evolved, right? Like customers are demanding that these robots have to operate faster than status quo. It has to work in tighter spaces. So all these means that your SLAM algorithm has to be top notch. It can't be some handcrafted. For people who are unaware, I should explain what SLAM is. It's one of these slightly harder problems in robotics where the robot has to simultaneously find out where it is and also map the environment in which it is operating. This used to be somewhat of a hard problem, I would say 7-8 years back. Very brittle, handcrafted. An algorithm that works in factory X will not work in factory Y. But those things are changing now with the last few years, the research breakthroughs that we have been seeing. So the same algorithms can work in like multi-season, different lighting conditions, different factories which have like long tunnels, factories which have like outdoors. So they seem to be doing pretty well. And as Abhijit correctly pointed out, it's largely because the compute power has been falling down. So you can do a lot more things on the edge. And as just alluded to, Indian environments can be quite diverse and quite unstructured. A lot of things that, if you get your robots to work in India, the the joke that we have in ATI is like it should work anywhere in the world. So that's like an edge that you get to do as an Indian robotics company. I think I can stop with a joke where in our first deployment, where we absolutely didn't anticipate it, a stray dog crossed the robot. We had no idea that such things can happen in a factory, but it happens, and you become wiser for it. So, just in conclusion, both perception and SLAM has evolved over the ages, and it's largely because research has caught up, and also because compute has caught up.
I'll just add to this. It's interesting. Many years ago, we backed this company called Perfint. It was a medical device that was focused around minimally invasive surgeries, especially around ablation and stuff like that. And when the robot hit the market, which is the hospital started buying it, there's they figured out that over a 5-month period, the calibration of the device was just going for a toss. Okay. Turns out the doctor was hanging his coat on the robotic arm, right? And, over a 5-month period, the calibration goes because the coat is just hanging all the time, right? So, I mean, the conditions here, because there's no standard operating procedures on a lot of these things, it's extremely challenging building solution for India. And like he's saying, if you can build for something that can work here, obviously it can be very useful all over.
Thanks, Sunjit. I'll come back to you, but to Derek, on the same lines, what I was talking about advances in edge. Indian industries are seeing a lot of digital transformations with probably sensors being put on shop floors, machines, people. Are we moving from, regular maintenance or reactive maintenance to preventive and predictive maintenance? And what are the challenges do you see, especially in that context?
Okay. India is a very tough market. The willingness to pay is very low, I would say. But if you look at it, so I'll start with where the demand lies and then follow it by the tech part, which is to support that. So we experimented with a lot of industries out there to predict the health, predict the failure of equipments. I think there were pilots which we did, many of them free, but really did not see scale from an economic perspective as a startup, right? And for us to survive, cash is very crucial. But having said that, I think the Indian market is responding to 3 problems right now. One is in the energy sector, if you look at it, especially refining industries. Corrosion is the cancer for a refinery, right? So we import crude right from Kazakhstan, Iran, variety of places. The chemical composition is different. It corrodes the pipes, right? And they spend crores of rupees, hundreds of crores of rupees in corrosion prevention and essentially treating that. It's always a response, a reactive thing. So they want to move from a reactive mode to a more proactive mode, and there are a lot of, for example, hyperspectral imaging of pipes is one area which they're exploring to see, can they detect changes in the chemical composition of the pipe before it gets very adverse, right? An electro-optical AI can only detect the brown color formation after it's too late, whereas spectral changes can be detected earlier. So that's one area where there is a willingness to pay because the intensity of the pain is very high, the value unlock is very high. Corrosion is one area. Second area, off late, we are seeing is there is a willingness to spend on emissions. So corrosion and emission related areas in the energy sector, I think 2 areas where I think the Indian market responds to. So if you look at the emission itself, right, carbon emission, methane emission, there is a lot of need for gathering data from drones or from satellite to understand the chemical profile of a refinery from which you can extract how much emission is happening and to do compliance reporting and stuff like that. So those are the 2 areas on the energy side of things. The second area where you're seeing is manufacturing, not the discrete so much. Our area has been more on the process chemical side of things. So where a lot of fluids come together and there's a recipe for cooking a chemical, so to speak, right? It's like your grandmother's secret recipe. You have to heat it for so much time. You have to pour the secret. So the recipe of a golden batch has to be unlocked from the existing processes. And there's a lot of AI to reverse engineer the recipe of a golden batch and to make sure that you're able to predict deviations from baseline behavior So if you look at it, pharma industry, process chemical industry, anyone kinds like Henkel, etc., the Gujarat, Bombay sector, there's a lot of need for that because the cost of a rejected batch is extremely high. And of course, the third area is defense, I would say. But in all of this, I think a common denominator from a technology point of view is, I mean, you have two ways of sensing. One is a very invasive way through sensory data. The other is non-invasive. Given that most of our assets, electromechanical assets, are not instrumented, I think there is a propensity to go the non-invasive way from a technology perspective. Yeah.
Thanks, Derek, for that perspective. Now that both Naveen and Derek have spoken about the technology part, Ranjit, to you the question would be, as an investor wearing an investor's hat, do you see we have reached an inflection point, or we are more at still a very nascent stage where a lot of work still needs to be done? How do you see this ecosystem evolve?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. I mean, and I'll tell you, it's more from the demand side, right? One of the first companies that I was involved in from an investment standpoint was a company called Connectem. I don't know if you remember it, but this was a company that was trying to do something in the M2M space. It used to be called machine-to-machine communication, where one machine will talk to the others, and I mean, I made the thesis saying, in a 5-7 year time frame, all the machines in the world will start talking to each other. I'm talking 2007. Okay, and we invested. I mean, the company took in, I think, $6 to $8 million, including some very strategic guys like Sasken and IBM were investors in that, and it was a very strong thesis on paper, right? It's been 15 years now, or maybe more than that, right? And still we're talking about early days, right, of this business. So I think it is still early. I think that the answer to that question is it is early, and it is not so much from the technology side. Obviously, like he was saying, a lot of things have changed from the technology standpoint. We were, using very small sensors to figure out how machines were operating. Edge computing has come. The cost of compute, the speed at which compute can be done. All of this has significantly changed and makes it a lot more easy to build stuff, right? I think the challenge really was on two fronts from a startup standpoint, and again, that's where a lot of my time is spent. Is two areas. One is in terms of adoption of this piece of tech by the large enterprises in India as a customer, and that's very, very difficult because, I mean, all said and done, labor is still cheap in India, right? And so anything to replace that piece takes a lot of effort and convincing. I mean, it's one thing that, like, I think there was this conversation earlier. There's a very top-down approach to this, right? I mean, because at the top, everybody understands the value for this, sees, automation is a big thing for the future and so on and so forth. But as this comes down to the shop floor, there is tremendous resistance in terms of adoption of some of these technologies. And that's really, when you talk, as a VC, when we talk, we really like the piece of tech, the working model, the team is great. When we talk to customers, and when we talk to, part of diligence, we talk to the senior folks who buy, and then when we talk to the people who actually use this stuff at the bottom or anywhere in the thing, it's a very different story. So I think that is really a gap that needs to be sorted out, and we believe that is changing, and that is changing with AI. I think it's a very different proposition, and I'll come to that in a bit. The second one is in terms of supply chain of capital. Some of these technologies, till about very recently, got very little support from the VC ecosystem. I mean, today almost every VC is talking about deep tech as a area that, I mean, we are saying we will commit 12 to 15% of our capital into deep tech, right? I know we've been investing in robotics. Like I said, we've committed $150 million with very little to see to show for some of those things. These are brilliant pieces of technology that were built by great folks, but just couldn't see the light of day because they were too early. So that's the risk that you run. And one piece on the capital front, I think, is getting sorted, right? Given the fact that there is a lot more interest from the VC community into this domain. So you will see a lot more capital flowing in. There are, again, I mean, we need to be very, very careful about where we, from a VC standpoint, because we have a huge responsibility of returning back capital within a period of time and so on and so forth. So it is very important to making sure that we invest into areas where the market has also opened, right? and that is, I mean, those are specific areas, whether it is in space, whether it is in, I think in the next 5-10 years, you'll see a lot more capital going into areas around semiconductors because there is significant push from the government side. And I think those makes a huge difference. So to answer the question, I think it's still early days, given that we've seen this play out over the last 15 years. But I think the difference is that there is a significant change from the capital allocation standpoint, and also from the demand side. There's a lot more adoption of tech for solving a lot more problems. And this is, we're seeing, if you look at any investor call, even in a publicly listed companies, the analysts are asking about what AI can do, which was not at all a question, even 10 years back, as to what technology can do and so on and so forth, because it's really a top-down, a significant push from the top down. And I think that will make a huge difference in terms of adoption of some of these tech.
Thanks, Sangeet. Keeping on that note, like you rightly said, it is basically, adoption on the factory floor and the technologies that are related to that. Just a continuation of that, how will you evaluate a startup who comes to you for funding, who has an Industry 5.0 offering? Do you look at the maturity of tech stack? Do you look at ROIs? Or do you look at acceptance? Or what is the kind of metric? It will be very interesting for the audience to understand that perspective.
Yeah, so I mean, again, putting this question into perspective, in the last 12 months, there are about 4,000 opportunities that hit our system, 12 to 15 month time frame. So, and we've invested in about 7 or 8. So, okay, I mean, so the chances that we can get this wrong is very, very high. Okay, but having said that, right, what are we looking for? We're looking for very smart people who can solve some problems that are extremely large within a time frame, right, of 10, 12 years, right? Because it's important, like I said, all fund lives have a certain time frame, and this is the challenge that has been in general with deep tech. The gestation periods for some of these companies are very long, right? And it requires significant amounts of capital because it takes longer. Whether it is in AI, whether it is in, I'm not talking at an applied AI level, but anything below it, right? Below the stack, I think takes a lot more capital, and so it's always been, which is why the challenge has been around funding some of these businesses, right? And the average age of the guy, again, I mean, the founder that we are backing today is about 28, 29, okay, order of magnitude, right? Which completely, questions the kind of people like me who are like extremely old around this, right? But I think the way to, what we are looking for is, especially around deep tech, right, is one is your understanding of why something will work. I mean, there must be some insight that you have figured out based on your experience in a certain domain that makes it work. That is extremely important. Second one is, one of the things that we figured out, like moats. I mean, there are a lot of these conversations around what's the technology moat and all of that. But I really think, given the pace at which technology is changing, the moat is really the quality of the team that is there, right? Yeah, your understanding of how the technology landscape is changing and how you can attract the right kind of people to kind of navigate that changing landscape, I think is significantly important from our investment thesis perspective. Then of course there are we deploy third party folks to do diligence on the IP landscaping to figure out it is not conflicting with somebody else. I mean, there are a bunch of those kind of things that happen across, but I think fundamentally it is about a problem. And then, like I said, we also speak to potential customers where they are in the buying journey, because this is very important. See, one of the things that we have figured out is in India is we have significant talent that can build something. There is that not enough talent that can sell what they've built. And we were having this conversation, right? And that's also an important thing. So if you have a set of founders who are extremely good in the lab building something out, then how do we are they open to getting somebody else around who can actually tell the story? And pitch this in the right form. All of those, I think, are, and that becomes extremely critical when we talk about deeper tech and some of these areas where it is physical in nature, right? I mean, it is so your buyer is physical in nature. So how do you tell a story where the product is physical and it's still not there for you to demonstrate and so on and so forth? So I think those kind of things also become an important element in our evaluation process.
Thanks, Sangeet. To both Naveen and Derek, probably Naveen first. Going by that paradigm that technology evolution is important and we need to look at USPs to invest and things like that. What do you feel is the most stubborn challenge when it comes to autonomous technologies, I would say, on an industry floor that we should focus upon as an ecosystem?
And just adding to Ranjit's point, right? Like, I think the gap between what the industry wants and what you end up innovating in the lab is real, and that's something that innovators, founders need to keep getting themselves grounded in. Right? What does the customer really want? I mean, what is the value that you are adding to his everyday life, and what will he pay for? Not just robotics, but any product for that matter, but robotics in particular, because these are age-old manufacturing industries which you're trying to disrupt, saying that don't push the cart, don't get a guy to move the bins, and I'll do this for you. But quickly you will realize that a company like Maruti is making a car every 1 minute. Okay, if a robot stops for 5 minutes, that's 5 cars out. Is your technology good enough to do that? He does not care about fancy slams or perception algorithms or AI in it. It has to be a robot that works. So that's what they care about, right? Like, so you need to ground yourself in reality. And I know it's not a fancy answer, but the answer is like the robot's got to work. It's got to be as fast as the current human alternative. It has to work in its brownfield factories, which are space constrained, and it has to be safe. So these are the 4 points that your products got to do.
Understood. Derek, your perspective?
So if you look at it, the journey to autonomous operations, right? It's a journey. You start with basic condition monitoring, then you go to diagnostics, prognostics, and then go to autonomous. But the jump from diagnostics, prognostics to autonomous, it's not only a technology issue, it's also a trust building issue, right? You have to earn the trust of the field guys, basically. So if you look at from an Indian perspective, like I'll just take one industry, energy industry. If you look at the lowest end of the value chain today, Shell out of here is Devanali is monitoring the health of all the motors globally. Chevron is moving all the digital refinery operations out of Bellandur. ABB, for example, is monitoring the energy guzzling and bad actors in Germany for a couple of infrastructure assets out of Jalali. So if you look at just Bangalore itself, Devanali, Jalali, Bellandur, people have started doing basic industrial monitoring, babysitting machines, so to speak, out of India, which is digitally connected, right? So that is the lowest part of the value chain where we are working in. If you look at the highest part of the value chain, which is completely autonomous operations, there are companies out of India right now for subsea operations, Gulf of Mexico, drilling operations, 2 miles into the water and stuff like that. If you look at it, it's almost like the World Trade Center of digital operations, large infrastructure, independent power operations, etc., etc. Now, if you look at the problem they're facing is they have like 40 or 50 operators who are continuously monitoring exceptions or alarms, both subsea as well as surface. And the challenge is it's like what an ICU nurse faces, right? If you're in an ICU, if an alarm comes, you do not know the priority of the alarms, right? And typically, if a nurse goes to the wrong patient, the other patient dies. A similar problem exists today in the industrial sector where the operators do not know the value of the alarm in terms of how quickly. So there is alarm flooding, right? And so we have started moving into autonomous alarm prioritization, and it will also look at historical actions taken by the operator. So you'll have a junior operator, let's say, who's like 5-10 years of experience versus an experienced guy with 30-40 operators. So an experienced guy would make certain moves, operator moves, which would stabilize the process probably, let's say, in 8 to 10 minutes. An inexperienced operator will take probably 1 hour or so. But what you're having is even journal, which essentially collects all the micro operator actions, which has never been mined. So today, we know companies which are actually mining the action logs and telling which action pathway or recipe is ripe to stabilize a process. Okay, so the tribal knowledge is getting harvested. Okay, and we are able to kind of close the loop there. So companies out of Bangalore, and this is probably the best unkept secret, is that we are operating on both ends of the value chain, both at the basic condition monitoring for the energy sector to the autonomous operations. And for this to happen, it's not just, I think AI is the shiny toy on it, but what is really required are two other equally important but unglamorous elements. One is you need to have a very strong electromechanical knowledge. You need to know the physics of the asset, the RPM torque curves. I mean, not so glamorous, but so vital to the outcome. So you need data, you need domain, you need AI. If all the three come together, there is value unlocked. So domain is very important. Industrial domain is very important. And intimate knowledge of the data itself. How do you process high frequency time series data? How do you process spectral data, lab information data? And there's a lot of data wrangling which happens out of that's equally important, very unglamorous, but equally important for us to power the autonomous operations.
Yeah, that's a very interesting perspective. I'll stay with that. Data collection to make things autonomous, interpreting the data. I think we are playing a very important role out there. And Derek, you have seen both sides of the world. You have seen enterprise. You have been a startup founder yourself. You have also seen the global scenarios. How would you compare this with the global scenarios, putting India in context with the global scenarios? Is there a USP that we should look at? Are we ahead somewhere? Are we lacking somewhere? Your perspective on our global positioning.
Okay, I'll provoke Ranjit a little bit on this first before. No, if you look at investment so if you look at consumer startups versus industrial startups, right? I think the VCs have a strong bias towards consumer startups and industrial startups. I'll give you an example, right? So we were supposed to be one of the industrial companies which raised funds before we got acquired, and we raised about $7 million in funding totally. Lot of struggle. But if you look at our competitors, who are we facing in the marketplace? We are competing against C3, we are competing against Spark Cognition, sometimes G would be there. All of them had triple-digit funding. Okay, we were like one-digit funding, competing with people who had almost 10 times more funding than us. And I think, so that's a big gap we face. Okay, but in terms of capability, I really think there are certain areas where we exceed what is available in the US, especially around the fusion of the physics and the statistics part, right? If you look at the Bay Area, they have a strong bias towards the AI side of things. If you look at Houston, they know the electromagnetic, but the two don't combine together. So whereas in Bangalore, we have the graceful mix of grey hat people who know the physics and the ponytail guys who know the AI. We can kind of do things together a lot. So you're seeing the advent of a lot of GCCs which are capitalizing on the talent. Definitely the product guys will take shape out of it. So capabilities wise, we are there. I think funding wise, we are not there.
Ranjit, that's a cue for you to pick up and.
No, I think this is like I said, I mean, VC bashing is like a very normal thing when it comes to some of these areas, right? Like I said earlier, consumer, we are a consumption story at the end of the day from an India perspective, right? And 1.4 billion people need access to good education, healthcare, you pick anything. And our sense is, technology can play a very significant role in building better access, better price points, and so on and so forth, which is why you see a lot of money that is going into consumption stories in India. And even for our investment thesis, right? I mean, 40% of our investment thesis will be driven around consumption. What I think is different, and hopefully, this is a change that I think I've seen from the last, when I started doing this in 2007 to what we're seeing today, is that there are a lot more VCs who are open and are, openly stating that, deep tech is a very significant portion of their investment thesis. And I think which is why I really hope in the next few years you will see. And this is, I have data to back this. If you look at the number of investments that have happened in deep tech over the last 6 months, right? Every quarter, the number of deals announced in deep tech is actually increasing every quarter. So it's just not lip service that the investors are doing. And from our standpoint, I can tell you, in Fund 5, we've committed about 10% already into deep tech, and we will increase that. There's no question. It is just, and I think it's also a reflection of the question around talent has not really come up in any of our conversations, really around the market. And we really think that there is a significant change on the demand side with whatever, both the gentlemen are saying in terms of how customers are adopting some of the tech that they're building is really, what is driving investments into these. And we are also building into the investment thesis that this is going to take longer, right? And so whole periods will be around 8-9 years. So it's important to make some of these commitments early in the fund. So I think some of those also are, rationalizations that the investors are doing. And I think this, in 2-3 years, hopefully this will change.
Thanks, Sandeep. I would rather for Naveen rephrase that question with respect to international innovations in autonomy and mobility. We hear many times that it's easier to hire the forklift drivers than get an autonomous vehicle in India, right? And then at the other end, you see Boston Dynamics and other people having very high-end offerings. How would you relate to this, especially in the MSME context in India? What kind of innovations we should look at, or are we comparable to Boston Dynamics? Where is the technology gap? A quick perspective in the interest of time.
Sure. We come into work every day to compete with the Boston Dynamics and MIRs of the world, right? So that's definitely the goal. But they built their brand over multiple decades. I won't worry about the funding part of it, but I would worry about the brand credibility that they have built over many decades. Especially their distribution channels is awesome. They have distributors in 80 countries or so. Building it overnight is not going to be easy for any new robotic startup. So you have your task cut out, but you can do it. Our goal has been that we have to cost innovate in India because this is a cost sensitive country. But you can't compromise on quality because we want to build for the world. So our philosophy has been to piggyback on that excellent manufacturing ecosystem that India has. We have TVS and Bajaj have made fantastic two-wheelers that are a hit all over the world. So why not use that ecosystem to build your robots? Of course, the robots will not work right off the bat because EVs work for a different condition, but you need to fine-tune them for robotic applications. So in terms of quality, you can get the product done, but how do you get customer trust? So you have to invest heavily in safety certifications, which are globally renowned. So that's something that you have to do as a robotics company, and I think you'll get there.
If I can just add on this, I don't know if any of you have gone to SF will know how to get into a Waymo, and which is a completely automated cab service, right? You get in and you just take the cab and go, right? Now we've backed a company called Minus Zero, which is building an automated platform for cars that can run by itself, right? Now again, this is two brothers out of Chandigarh. I think they're just out of engineering college, right? So my limited point here is, right, it is important to making sure that when we build these, we have, like you said, keep the global markets in the view as you build this, because regulations and all of that, it's a little bit more evolved in some other places. Now, there's also another thought process, right? Because the regulatory framework is not as evolved as it is in some other places, in India is lower on the spec, that there are things that you can get done here faster, right, than anywhere else in the world, and then you have enough proof points to show it works. So it works both ways in terms of how do you think about it, but any of these kind of technologies that you build, I think it's very important to keep the global markets in perspective and think about it from that lens and not just look at it limited to an India proposition.
Sure. Before we open it to the floor, I would like to touch upon one important point, that is of policy, governance, standardization. When Industry 5.0 consumes a lot of AI, what about the ethics of the algorithm? What about the data governance around it? Because your model will be as mature as your data. We do not have ways and means today to share data across industries for the right reasons. I would like to get the panelist perspective of this. What should be one focus area, starting with Derek probably, on data governance and policy interventions?
I'm a big believer in data plumbing because, similar to pipelines, you can't automate the need for a plumber, right? Plumbers are always required, right, to go and do that. You can automate the cleaning part of it with a robot, but the under the hood stuff, I think there'll always be. So my son was asking me, you're studying and a lot of things were getting automated. He was asking me, everything is getting automated. Design is getting automated. And I told him one thing, plumbing will never get automated. Data plumbing will never get automated. Okay. And I think, to some extent, I think India can become the data plumbing hub for industry. Okay. So if you look at the texture of data which needs to be plumbed, on the manufacturing side, energy side, mining side, I mean, they got a lot of SCADA systems, OT systems, drone data, welding, radiological data. All of this is not organized in a fashion ready for AI. Okay, AI is good, but you have to create very structured data products which can be ingested by the agents. So that whole data prep and data factory, cooking factory is not yet there for industry. So even if you go, I think creating pipelines around sensory pipelines, vision pipelines, it could be even a technician who comes on a shift. Today, if you look at the shift log, right, they write on a piece of paper and keep it. And the shift log has a lot of knowledge in it. So they're creating voice files. So ingesting all this multimodal data, voice, sensors, vision, then a standard operating procedure documents, and making it all into a knowledge graph for agents. I think the ability to convert this raw, unprocessed data into industrial knowledge graphs before it goes to the agents or the AI is a big opportunity, because I don't think, and there's a lot of headroom. I think we are just tapped less than 5% of that opportunity. Creating industrial knowledge graphs is a huge opportunity, because at the end of the day, if you store it in a traditional structure, right, you can't do reasoning. If you want to do a root cause analysis of a failed batch, right, it's better to interrogate a knowledge graph than a traditional structure. So a lot of opportunity exists in the data wrangling space and creating those industrial data pipelines and basically babysit them for a long time.
Taking on that cue, Ranjit, would you like to see a government-driven sandbox for some of this to evaluate? And as an investor, what's your perspective?
Yeah, see, all of this runs on tons and tons of data, and I agree with Derek saying that India has this huge opportunity given just the the volume of data that we generate on a daily basis is significantly higher. So I'm also a very strong believer in sovereignty of data, right? And this is very important to understand, right? Because lots of these technologies can shift, and if we don't have that sovereignty, whatever learnings that we have can actually disappear with the models and so on and so forth. So having said that, it's also important. We are very, very early days of some of these technologies, and so building too much of restriction around I won't say sandboxing is bad, but really one of the reasons for consumer adoption of AI, is because it just happened, right? People have not been able to block it, right? And some of these, and that's the other reason, right? Because it's both bottoms up and tops down. Now, if you think about from an enterprise standpoint, that consumers are already using AI and they're saying, why can't AI be used in the enterprises, right? So I think it's important to keep in mind, regulations are important around some of these and how we use data and stuff like that. So sovereignty, and I think sovereignty is an important aspect, important conversation around specifically AI. And with with the amount of data that we can generate, insights that we can generate, I really think India can stand a very, very strong chance of leading this in multiple domains, given the volume of data that we can generate, which can use to develop these models and so on and so forth.
Naveen, very quickly, do you see any needs for regulations around human-machine interactions or robot-machine interaction safeties that should be evolved from your perspective?
It's already there. 22448 is an ISO standard that's coming up. It's going to be there, available in draft next year, early next year, and it'll be fully available in 2027. It's functional safety for AI, how AI should work as a software layer for all your industrial applications. There'll be different ratings, there'll be evals. You can quantify your software as to how safe it is. So it's already in the works. Folks in the industry are talking about it. NVIDIA, like always, they put a lot of money in this because they are software-driven AI, right? So they need to show that they can build stacks which are AI-driven. So a lot of work is already happening.
To stay informed about the startup ecosystem, subscribe to My Startup TV.